So this will give all of you a good overview of art history. By looking at the most expensive paintings, you'll have an idea about what's happening in the marketplace. And again, it also give you a nice cross section of different types of artworks, because there's certainly all different fields, all different isms that are represented by the most expensive paintings. So when I first started teaching at Cal State Fullerton, this was one of the first things that was kind of making the news. And I remember hearing about Boy with Pipe by Picasso, and I was like, okay, I've been studying art history for a number of years. How come I haven't heard of this painting? And it was a kind of a eye-opening. I'm like, okay, first of all, it made me realize just exactly how many Picasso works there are. And there are so many thousands. And this is valuable for a few reasons, but one of them is it is from the Rose period, and there were not very many paintings from the Rose period. It was a very short period. So he starts with the blue period and it goes into the Rose period, which is a little happier, and then it goes in kind of into his classical phase, and on and on, Cubism, all different types of styles. So this was a work that was done in his studio. There was a young man that used to come and hang out, see what he was doing. He used to kind of play with his pipe and pretend he was an adult, and I think that appealed to Picasso. So 1905, very, very early in Picasso's career. This would be an early work, and it also has a sense of beauty to it as well. A little bit of the Greco-Roman thing. He doesn't have ivy around his head, and there's no coronet of ivy, but he does have a coronet of roses. And you just get the sense that he's playing with all the props that are in the studio. So this was painted in Montmartre, and it's just a wonderful study of that in-between age. He's not young, he's not an adult, he's that in-between age. He's that kid that you don't know where to sit him at the Thanksgiving table. Is he going to be at the kid table? Is he going to be at the adult table, or somewhere in between? So it's that kind of awkward age. So yes, it sold for around $104 million. Now, sometimes it gets reported slightly different. So if a number you see is slightly different than one that you've heard, that's why. They get reported different ways. So its estimate was 70 million, but it far exceeded that. He painted it when he was 24, and again, it's a very, very brief period. A number of his works have gone for more than $100 million. So just hugely valuable. Edvard Munch's post-impressionist work, it's very expressionistic, which means, again, it kind of reflects the angst of the individual. It is very full of expression as far as human expression, and it's an iconic work. It's a work that is very, very recognizable. People that may not know anything about art know about the scream. Even the gesture, people know that's the scream. So this was produced in the 1890s, a fin de siècle work. So it's end of the century. There's a period of instability. It's darker than Impressionism. It's a deeper color, so we call it post-impressionist. But it's also the beginnings of Expressionism. There are more than one version. You probably did not know that. I think a lot of people think there's just one. So this is one of those works that's sometimes reported as 119 million. This particular source was 120. And again, it is based on, they're adding in fees and whatnot, but it's still a huge number. So it's a spectacular work. It actually was based on an event that happened. He was walking with friends, and he actually said he felt this scream through him. And so we don't know if it's a symbolic scream, an emotional scream within him, or it could actually have been literal, because there was actually a mental institution below this area where they believe this was originated. And then they also think on this particular area in Norway has spectacular sunsets. And so there's some thought that this is really what he saw. So it, again, big money. Here we have Warhol's, big money there. So in any case, yes. So it was stolen, it was recovered. Why is it that when an artwork is stolen, it seems to improve its value? I think it's because suddenly everyone's aware of it. It gets a lot of attention, and then it increases its value because it's perceived as more valuable because somebody wanted to steal it. But there's no definitive answer. But it is interesting that if an item gets stolen, you can just about hike up its market value. Unless it's, of course, too damaged, and that can be a problem as well, because there have been a few works that they think ended up in the incinerator or this kind of an oven. So yeah, that has happened because the people didn't want to be prosecuted. So this is what he says about it, and there's actually more than one source of this, and the slightly different, but it's so we pretty much believe this is exactly what he was thinking about. Um, and so you see his friends. I was walking along the road with two friends, and he's kind of done this capitalization like a poem. The sun was setting, the sky turned a bloody red, and I felt a whiff of melancholy. I stood deathly tired over the blue-black fjord and city hung blood and tired tongues of fire. My friends walked on. I remained behind, shivering with anxiety. I felt the great scream in nature. And this is Edvard Munch. And so Edvard Munch, he didn't have a good life. He was not a happy person. He had a tragic life. He lost his mother. He lost his sister. He had a father that was a religious fanatic. He dealt with a lot of pain and depression, and it was tough. So 2 years and 9 days after they were stolen, the Scream and Madonna are now back on display. And so obviously this was done later. So again, they did have some damage, but it was restored. So thankfully, it was something that they were able to restore to good condition. So here they are. There are 4 versions. Some say 5 if you count the print. There's also a kind of a black and white print. 1893, tempera on cardboard. Tempera is like an egg-based paint. 1895, pastel on cardboard. 1910, tempera on board. And 1893, crayon on cardboard. So again, it has many manifestations, but his works are great. I mean, recently I did a lecture on Edvard Munch, and I thought, okay, I'll look and see if there's some happy pictures. There's a few, but not many. He really did have kind of a more than a difficult life. So it's certainly been parodied a great deal, a lot. So here we of course have Homer Simpson and Home Alone, and again, it's a gesture that everyone knows. Now, this is one sensuous Madonna. It's a very different Virgin than you typically see. And this is 1894, again, nearing the end of that century. This is a period of instability. They didn't know what the new century was going to bring. Remember 1999? And so the criminals were caught, they were jailed, they were fined, but some damage was done. And again, they were carefully repaired. But this is a very distinct Madonna. It's quite different than anything you've probably seen. And she does have a halo, but she's pretty sensuous. Jackson Pollock. Jackson Pollock held the record for a long time for his works. Now, people either love his works or they hate his works. That's just all there is to it. It seems like there's very few people that are ambivalent. I'm sure they're out there, but very few. And so he's this angst-filled, wearing black stereotype of the difficult artist. You think of Jackson Pollock, Caravaggio. You have the sense that you probably wouldn't have liked Picasso very much. And so again, these kind of tortured artists. And I certainly think his personality and his alcoholism and his brawling, um, he fits that type. He was married to Lee Krasner. This is abstract expressionism. It is about the gesture. It's about movement. He was listening to jazz when he was producing these works. And people say, okay, my 5-year-old can do it. Probably not. There is a gesture to it. There is a rhythm to it, almost a dance. People would actually come and watch him work. He's not pouring a typical paint. This is enamel paint. This is garage paint. This is what he had around. It is not a professional grade paint. You get the cigarette ashes are in there. Change might fall from his pocket. There might be a paper clip in it. I mean, literally, there is stuff embedded in these works, and a few have his fingerprints because he was very, very active about the way he moved through the paint. So why? Why so much? Okay, that's what everyone wants to know. There's a few reasons. Americans prize originality. Now, it doesn't matter if you and I go and try to reproduce this. It won't be the same. We're not going to get credit for it again. It's been done. And it was part of a time period. Abstract Expressionism, also known as New York School, considered first important major work. Big name. He was in Life magazine, incredible bio, archetype again of the tormented artist. And all of these things, I think, contribute to this personality that intrigues people. And again, I think the main reason is the abstract expressionists, the New York School, is one of the first purely American art movements. They're not influenced by the landscape painting of the past. They're not influenced by what Picasso was doing or what Matisse were doing. It's completely new. And I think that's one of the main reasons. It also kind of looks completely cool with contemporary furniture. So I usually see Pollock's number 5 in vertical position. Most of his works are horizontal, and so who knows? So when I think of his works, I do think of them as more horizontal, but there are a few exceptions. And so painting was done 8 foot by 4 foot, so these are large. Fiberboard with thick amounts of brown and yellow drizzled, forming a nest-like appearance. Originally owned by Samuel Irving Newhouse and displayed at the MoMA before being sold to David Geffen. Then it supposedly sold to David Martinez, who denied ownership through his lawyers. Now, when a lot of these works are acquired, they're very secretive about who purchases them. First of all, how do you even insure them if people know you have this sort of work? So it's understandable. Oftentimes, these artworks will get loaned to a museum because, again, they have security and they have insurance, and so it's kind of understandable. Super rich bidders propelled a 1969 Francis Bacon triptych to $142.4 million. So it finally topped Jackson Pollock's 140 mil. At Christie's on Tuesday night, this was in the New York Times in 2013. Again, numbers vary a bit. Sometimes it says just under 145 million, and it's called the Lucian Freud triptych. Freud was one of his very good friends. He's also an interesting artist. I like his work, but certainly he was an intriguing artist as far as his personality as well. So this is 3 studies of Lucian Freud, 1960s. And his work is, I've heard his work described as if you were viewing a person inside out, turned inside out. You see, it's very expressionistic. So frantic bidding was said to have taken place, and that it far exceeded that $85 million estimate of this triptych. Now, a triptych is usually religious, so it's kind of interesting that he chose to have these different views of his friend Lucian Freud instead. So, and this is his self-portrait. as the ultra-wealthy become even wealthier, the top end of the art market, along with real estate and other luxury sectors, have experienced an incredible surge as cash is being channeled into alternative investments, add the rare aspect of the piece and the contemporary art market, and you know why. And this is from Forbes magazine. So you know what he looks like. This is not representational art, because representational art, you would be able to recognize him. And one of the more famous triptychs is the Merode altarpiece. And this was by the master of Flamel, who some people believe was Robert Campin. So yes, one is very religious, one is very not, very secular. So scarcity is part of it. Bacon was very popular in the contemporary art market as well. Sadly, Bacon destroyed a lot of his artworks. We hate when artists do that. So he has a considerably smaller body of work. He wasn't prolific, and so there were, at this particular auction, there were Warhols that were up for grabs, and only 10 Bacon lots have come to auction in 2013. So again, large problem was he would get upset and he would destroy his artworks. And actually, he's most famous for his Pope pictures, and later he said, I wish I'd never done them. So but that was really what kind of made him well known. So this is his Screaming Pope, and it's based on Velázquez's Pope Innocent, the 10th portrait. Interestingly, at the Vatican, they own a Francis Bacon Pope picture. So one of these dark images of the Pope, it's really interesting to see it in the Vatican collection. So he's an Irish-born Brit, best known for, again, post-War II paintings and these rather grotesque, scary images. This one shows up in my Halloween lecture. And so, again, they're pretty creepy. And you see the brushwork is intense. It looks very energetic. And again, there's that scream. You could connect it to the scream. So he is associated with the Young British Artist and the YBAs, and also Damien Hirst is one of the Young British Artists. And so they were a group that began exhibiting in the 80s and became very known for the openness to new processes, new materials. Shock art was very much associated with the Young British Artist. And again, they regularly were making headlines. They still do, especially Damien Hirst. Mark Quinn and his Bloodheads, Tracy Emin in her very provocative works as well, where she's very, very open about her sex life. And so former British Prime Minister Margaret Thatcher once described him as that man who paints those dreadful pictures. And so he wasn't afraid to show the ugly aspects of art. And again, and he dealt with depression and unhappiness. He really struggled. So here is his own self-portrait. So he paints his friends that way, but he also paints himself that way. And so this sold for, it's small, this sold for around 20 million euros. Euros are usually a little higher than, roughly 25 to 30% higher than the dollar, but it fluctuates. He struggled with acceptance from his family, especially his father. He was caught dressing in his mother's clothing, and being gay was very, very difficult in the 20s and 30s. Dealt with a lot of death in his personal life, and one biographer, or a couple actually, have even said he had this unusual crush on his father, and he just didn't quite know what to do with his sexuality. And so he turned it inward, and he was a sometimes pretty depressed person. So abstract expressionism influence, I think you can say that. But his work is very distinctive and very much his own. And Cubism, certainly, to a certain extent, this idea of showing different aspects of the face in 2D way. So very much different. Kirchner, double self-portrait, 1914. So Bacon spent time in Berlin and would have seen the German and Russian expressionist work. I think you can see the connections to Ernst Ludwig Kirchner as well. And he's, again, associated with German expressionism. This work had a starring role in a movie fairly recently, 2015, Women in Gold. You can still rent it. I know a lot of people do. There was a dispute over ownership. This ended up in the courts. And this is a photograph of Adele Bloch Bauer from a prominent Jewish family. Klimt loved to paint beautiful ladies. He loved to have beautiful ladies walking around his studio, often in various states of undress. And he painted Adele Bloch Bauer more than once. And so this was lost during the Holocaust. And again, there was a battle that ensued. And ultimately, her family prevailed, and they were able to win the suit. And the painting was restored to the original family, or the Jewish family. So you can watch it. It's a great movie. Gustav Klimt, Art Nouveau, mostly famous for The Kiss, 1908. And so this is his signature work, and it has not sold recently. It's in Vienna. It's a square work. I think it's 70 by 70. Swirling, elegant, gorgeous. For many people, this exemplifies love. They're positioned in this impossible position. Her neck can't possibly fit on her head that way. More than one person has noted the very phallic shape of the contour line of this couple. And my favorite detail is those feet. She's literally almost falling. She's on the brink. And so it is this rather beautiful detail. And so for a lot of people, this is their favorite Klimt work. There's a lot of lavish gold. His father was a goldsmith, so he loved working with gold. He's part of the Vienna Succession, but again, also associated with Art Nouveau. So certainly he's been a very, very popular artist. And here we have Adele Bloch Bauer shown, and then you can see her descendant holding it. And again, she won this wonderful case, and it sold for a lot of money. So, Byzantine style, a mosaic, and it was acquired by Ronald Lauder of Estee Lauder, a cosmetics tycoon, and it's one of Klimt's golden phase works, and that's what we call that period where he was using a lot of lavish gold. And Klimt didn't live to be very old. He actually died in his 50s of pneumonia, right after the Spanish flu. So Helen Mirren visiting the painting, she starred in Woman in Gold. So again, I won't tell too much about it in case you do look at it. So another very expensive Klimt, Adele Bloch Bauer II, and Oprah Winfrey made a little bit of money, a lot of money, selling Portrait of Adele Bloch Bauer II for $150 million. She almost doubled her money. So purchased for $87.9 million. So well, maybe not quite, but she did quite well. And so the buyer is allegedly an unidentified Chinese collector. So the Bloch Bauers were the artist's important patrons. They were wealthy. You can see that from the lavish works and the beautiful fabrications. Often there's beautiful fashion in Klimt's works. Indeed, one of his closest friends, a woman, was Emily, and she was also a clothes designer. So in any case, many of these works were seized by the Nazis, and in the past, oh, I know, several decades, some of them have been restored, but not all of them. So in any case, so Maria Altman is the woman that ultimately prevailed against the state and received that incredible painting. So emphasizes her incredible height, elegance, high social standing, and she really looks quite beautiful. I think she actually looks a little more beautiful in this one than the other, but again, it's just whatever one you like. The colors are quite different. This has cool tones, but it still has a lot of the same signature qualities of Gustav. So this was sold by the subject's heirs initially after they won a drawn-out legal battle with the Austrian state over 5 Klimt canvases. During World War II, so that were lost during World War II. The details are really gorgeous, though. Okay, it's getting bumped up again. So we've been in the 140 mil area. Pollock and then Klimt, and now we've gone up to 155, some reporting 158. This is Picasso's La Rêve, The Dream. And beautiful portrait of Marie Thérèse. Marie Thérèse was one of Picasso's many lovers. He only married 2 of them, but she also had a child with him as well. And in any case, this really went crazy at the auction. And if any of you have ever experienced an auction, you know how easily it is to get caught up in the energy. And so this is from 2013. So it's only been in the last, I don't know, 15 years that these numbers have really started being driven up. So the 45-year-old Picasso met the beautiful Marie Thérèse when she was 16, some say 17, and he basically walked up to her. She knew who he was. Picasso at this point was well known. I would like to do your portrait. I have a feeling we will do great things together. I am Picasso. And so there's several sources that basically say the same thing, that he walked up and said, I am Picasso. And so she indeed was with him for a while, but she did not have a happy ending. She ended up committing suicide. Tragic life, really. But she's usually shown in beautiful primary colors and very, very sweet, sinuous line. Marie Thérèse was a very sweet young woman, and it's so interesting to juxtapose, for instance, the curvilinear forms of Marie Thérèse with, for instance, the sharp imagery of Dora Maar. So different women, he painted different ways. So 22 years old when this was painted. And so why is it so expensive? Well, it's Picasso. Be aware, Picasso, there's a tremendous number of frauds out there. Because he was such a prolific artist, there's a huge number of frauds. Drawings, it's certified. Well, if you have a really good copier, you can make a really good certified copy, basically explaining artworks on provenance. Basically, provenance is its background, its history. And the more its history can be proven, the better. But a lot of times, Picasso's works are frauds. In fact, they say that his works are copied more than any other. So, in any case, some of his late work, like his ceramics, I think some of his late work, at that point in time, he knew he could produce anything, and people would buy it. And so I think some of his late work is not terrific myself. So this work was owned by Steve Wynn at a certain place in time. And he was about ready to sell it. And he was actually talking with friends. I think Barbara Walters was one of the people. And he was gesticulating His arms were moving, kind of like I do when I talk all the time. But in any case, what he did was his elbow hit it and actually tore a hole in part of her arm. And so it was, basically it was about ready to be sold. And so uh, initially he was just horrified, and then again he was like, no, no, it's fine, it's fine. And then at some point in time, the insurers and his lawyers probably said, no, 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 uh, claim the damages. So in any case, ultimately it turned out okay for him, because in 2013 he actually sold it for even more, at $155 million. I think it's perceived as one of Pablo Picasso's notable works, one of his more important works. So Pablo Picasso early works, Blue Period when he was sad, Rose Period when he was starting to come out of his depression, and then the phase of analytical cubism, 1910s. He's producing these gray and gold and brown cubist works, analytical cubism. And then it moves into synthetic cubism, which is again more colorful. Three um, musicians is an example. And so, again, quite different. So, move on. Big surprise. Van Goghs go for a lot of money. And that's true. And if I'm not covering some of the works, it's because there are a lot of them out there. But I tried to kind of pick some key works. But even so, I think you'll have a pretty good overview about what things cost in the art world. If a Van Gogh was to come up for sale right now, I think it would go well over 100 million. Dr. Gachet, $82.5 million. Vincent van Gogh is not an impressionist, he is a post-impressionist. Sometimes he's called it an early expressionist because of that really dramatic brushwork. He's certainly influenced by the impressionist, but his palette is deeper, the tones are deeper. And so complementary colors, yellows and golds against blues. And why? Because we love Vincent van Gogh. Vincent van Gogh has this tragic, intriguing biography, and people are fascinated by him, fascinated by the story. So he was sold to a paper manufacturer in Japan who later died, and there's a little bit of mystery as to who has it now. So in a letter, Vincent van Gogh stated Dr. Gachet was as sad and messed up as him. And again, slightly paraphrased. On the table, there's digitalis, which is from the foxglove plant. And there is an intriguing theory that he was taking digitalis. That was one of the medications they were giving him. And one of the side effects of digitalis is kind of this yellow sparking of eyesight, and that he might have perceived yellow dots on things and painted them. I don't know. I don't know if I buy that. But part of art history is coming up with interesting new theories that they try to find support for. So late work, that also makes it valuable. Swirling paint shows his emotional state, expressive, swirling, almost manic brushwork. You can see he probably identified with Dr. Gachet. Again, beautiful, beautiful work. And even without seeing the title, you kind of know it's a Van Gogh. It has a very distinctive look. So foxglove, and be careful. If you have that in your yard and you have pets, it can be deadly. Here we have Dr. Gachet, and of course, his famous work, everyone knows it, Starry Night. So Starry Night, 1890s, and beautiful, beautiful expressionistic sky, complementary colors. There's a church in the middle. His family was extremely religious. He came from an extremely religious background. The cypress tree in the foreground, oh, that's a symbol of death. No, it's not. There's letters that talk about how beautiful he thought the cypress trees were. And so there's so much movement in the cypress tree shown here. Willem de Kooning, Dutch, really ticked off the feminists with these works. And Woman 1, Woman 2, Woman 3, and so in any case, ultimately Woman 3 is what sold for $137.5 million. At inflation, they say it's more 160 million. So slashing, gestural, abstract expressionist works, New York School, and they often command these huge prices because, again, it was a distinctly American art movement. And again, some people think they're just terrible. She kind of reminds me of the Venus of Willendorf, this kind of goddess image. The Venus of Willendorf, who's also now sometimes called the Woman of Willendorf, because if she is indeed Paleolithic, there was no Venus. So the Woman of Willendorf, she's any woman. She has this either hat or hairstyle that's very, very distinctive. She has these little tiny spaghetti arms. She's holding her arms in a really unusual way. It's no way that I see women hold their arms. She's heavy set. If you're Paleolithic and living in a time period where maybe there's not enough food, a woman that's well fed would have been perceived of as positive. She's may have been a little fetish. She's only about 4.5 inches tall, so not very big at all. My favorite de Kooning by far, A Woman on a Bicycle. Again, I just think it's fascinating. Try to find the bicycle. Okay, you can kind of see, where the wheel of the bike is. There's a back wheel and a front wheel. And is she wearing high heels? It sure looks like she's wearing high heels. And a dress, because everyone likes to bicycle in a dress. And she has 2 mouths, and she kind of looks like a cheese grater. And all this movement. And it said they actually, all of that paint is pretty thick. And it actually took him a while. He's reworking and reworking and reworking this very expressionistic work. And again, what I like about it is just trying to find the bicycle in that. So, gotta love Google. Google 1950s shoes, and kind of find something that's kind of like he might have seen or imagined. And so this is the abstract expressionist Willem de Kooning. His wife was also an artist as well, Elaine de Kooning, a very notable artist, and yet you never ever hear about her, I should say. So this work was produced when Picasso was in his 70s. His later work returns to old master themes, reinterpreted, appropriated, and probably the most important Picasso that's in private hands, according to this news source. So this is a Cubist oil from 1950s, Les Femmes d'Alger, Women of Algiers, and it went for a final hammer price of $179.4 million with all the fees added in there. So really incredible. And I'll try to put a few of the little bits of the auction. They're fun to watch. So also called version O, inspired by Delacroix. Here's some portraits of well, I'll be nice. So Delacroix, Women of Algiers, and so here you see kind of sorta women of Algiers. These women have been reduced mostly to breast, frankly, and there's a bum there, and I don't know what happened to their heads, but and again, this is Picasso. Now, this is much more fun in a classroom when students have their different opinions about where is that? Where is that? I don't see that. No, it's kind of messed up. Kuhn said, "When I made Balloon Dog, I wanted to make a piece that reflected the joy of celebrating a birthday or a party. Balloon Dog is materialism and monumentality, a Trojan horse." Now, for contemporary art, I sometimes use kind of non-academic sites. This is Wide Walls. This went for $58.4 million, a record for a living artist. More recently, Portrait of an Artist. This is Pool with Two Figures. Sold at a Christie's sale in November 2018. So we're kind of moving down the timeline for $90,000 and some change. And the estimated hammer price was $80 million. The previous record was set by Koons in 2013 for, of course, Balloon Dog. And ultimately, David Hockney's work went above it. So David Hockney is here with his shown with his lover, and you see him gazing into the pool. He's pretty much famous for these pool pictures. David Hockney does these incredible portraits, and what he kind of made his name for was these pools, paintings of California pools. They show up in a lot of textbooks. So swimming pools are one of his muses, according to the tape. He said, "I always loved swimming pools, all the wiggly lines they make." So this double portrait shows a young man standing on the pool's edge looking down at a submerged swimmer. The swimmer is based on Hockney's former lover, California artist Peter Schlesinger, with whom he had broken up a year later. And so again, there's some conjecture that he's showing a relationship there. A study for the painting sold for $2.1 million. That's just for the study at 2016 Sotheby's auction. Now, the two main houses where these auctions generally occur are Sotheby's and Christie's. Jeff Koons again, and here he is posing with his rabbit at the Tate Modern. Some people love Jeff Koons and some people hate Jeff Koons. People are seemingly one or the other. I'm kind of ambivalent, but some of his work really does bother a lot of people, and it does verge on pornography. So 91 million, and then again, this was a record for a living artist. So again, it didn't last very long. This was May 2019. And it's Rabbit. So here is Jeff Koons' Rabbit. So yeah, really incredible. So from the comments on video, Koons was a Wall Street commodities broker who can't draw, who can't paint, who can't sculpt, and hires assistants to execute all his crap. Art News said it best. He made banality, blue chip, pornography, avant-garde, and tchotchkes into trophy art. And how Jeff Koons, with the support of a small circle of dealers and collectors, masterminded his fame and fortune. And so again, a lot of people are very critical of his work. In fact, he doesn't often do much work. He is often just moving around his studio supervising his assistants. So yes, this was Play-Doh, and I saw this at the Getty Malibu and the Getty Villa, and it's unusual for them to show contemporary art, but they did show contemporary art and a really interesting exhibition when they reopened after a remodel. And I got to go to the opening since my husband's in commercial construction, and they did some of the work there. But in any case, it's a very cool work. It's huge, absolutely huge. A balloon version of Rabbit floated in Times Square during the Macy's Thanksgiving Day Parade in 2007. So his work is very recognizable. His name's very recognizable. So again, why? Oh, this work is considered by some the holy grail of his works in certain collecting circles. The bunny's allure was burnished by the fact that Newhouse was its long-time owner. It also received an extraordinary pre-sale display. Christie's was promoting it with a custom-built room that perched the rabbit on a pedestal surrounded by lighting mimicking a James Turrell installation. And so this Newhouse was a Condé Nast chairman who died in 2017. So Rothko, of course, Rothko shows up, and this went for the extraordinary number of $186 million. And so, again, moving down that timeline, it's just absolutely incredible how expensive some of these works are. Who's buying them? Very wealthy people. A lot of times, again, they do not always reveal who gets them. Sometimes when they sell, we find out who sold them. So color fields developed by Rothko, the idea of the viewer getting immersed in color. And not a terrific picture of the MoMA's work, number 22, with a security guard. He was very tall, so I wanted people to see the scale. And he was fascinating to stand and talk with as well. In the corner, there is work by one of my students, Ken Hirsch, and it was a lovely work he called Blue and Tan. And you can see it's kind of an homage to Rothko. So it fit in very well with my Rothko lecture. So do I even want to try to say that name? I don't think so. So we'll call him Dimitri. So Dimitri alleges that Yves Bouvier misled him about the price of Mark Rothko's number 6, violet, green, and red. The Russian shelled out 140 million euros, the highest amount ever paid for work by an American painter. Today, 52% of the deals are made between private patrons to avoid the high fee of auction houses. Damien Hirst has often tried to avoid intermediaries selling his art as well, and certainly come under fire for it. So a showdown, Russian collector and a Swiss art merchant is exposed as freewheeling market in a private sales where collectors trade masterpieces like chips in a casino. And so again, a very expensive game at 186 million. And so as far as I know, this is the current record for an American artist. Cezanne, huge numbers. Looks like $274 million for a Cezanne. And again, I was really startled by this. And Cezanne, father of modern art, certainly his perspective is unique, this kind of tilt perspective. He did around, I think, 5 of the card players. Post-impressionist, he is doing loose brushwork. He's most known, I think, for his still lifes and his views of Mount Saint Victoire in his hometown. He loved Aix-en-Provence in his hometown. He loved the view of Mount Saint Victoire and painted it many, many times. It was fairly prolific. So this one, I just think everyone likes to look at it, and it's very visually interesting. Who's ahead? Who's winning? What's going on? And the unique kind of vantage point, but he was not very successful in his lifetime, and hugely successful after, obviously. So he shows modern life, peasants or working class playing cards. This idea of painting modern life, fairly new. But again, he produced more, around 5 of them. And it's said that he was actually influenced by a 17th century genre work that was at a museum in his hometown. So this particular work, certainly the palette's similar, you can certainly see that, but it's still very, very different. The nation of Qatar has purchased this Paul Cezanne painting, and Qatar has often purchase some really, really pricey images. So in any case, this is Paul Cezanne, The Card Players. So this is, again, what he's best known for, I think. Um, Again, this unique tilted perspective. If it kind of looks like the fruit's going to fall on the viewer, it might be a Cezanne. Still lifes, and it's not still lives, it's still lifes when you make it plural. They were not valued by the academic salon. They were kind of low on the totem pole. Historical works, mythological works, that was, high class. And then underneath that, maybe portraits of kings and queens, and then landscapes, and at the very bottom, still lifes and animal pictures. And so, again, I think he's pretty well known for these today. So again, here is the hierarchy of genres. The term genre is actually used two different ways in art history. We're talking about the hierarchy of genres or the grouping of paintings, or when we're talking about genre works, we're talking about scenes of everyday. So the card players can also be described as a genre work, an everyday scene. Now, mind you, it's not everyday now, but it would be everyday then. So again, highest historical, mythological, and then you have portraiture, landscapes, everyday scenes, animal scenes, again, very bottom, still lifes. Gauguin, post-impressionist, 1892, When Will You Marry? And this astounded me, a record $300 million. And so Qatar again, it bewilders me more than a little bit. Beautiful, bold colors influence the Nabis. Nabis, N-A-B-I-S, means prophet. It was a group that loved bold colors, swaths of color. And here you, of course, see these beautiful island girls. He basically he leaves Europe and he goes back and he goes to Tahiti, he goes to Martinique, and he goes to the Marquesa Islands, and he basically is trying to get back to a more authentic type of life. And then what happens is they start westernizing, and he wasn't happy about that. So this is Tahitian work. Self-portrait with Yellow Christ. Here you can see a portrait of Gauguin. And again, Gauguin is part of the story because he was so connected with Vincent van Gogh. I think it's really interesting that art history often is dismissive of the fact that he was cohabitating with very young girls. But I've heard art historians say, well, you have to contextualize it. That's what was happening. It was still creepy. And even in his time, it was still fairly incomprehensible. Another self-portrait of himself as a Christ figure. This was an image that didn't make Vincent van Gogh very happy. In fact, he even borrows Vincent van Gogh's reddish hair. Again, interesting work. So again, part of the story, he stays with Vincent van Gogh in Arles. Vincent van Gogh wanted to have an artistic community, and he was just imagining this wonderful, wonderful world, and his friend was going to come and live with him for a while, and they were going to basically set up a community of artists, kind of like Laguna a long time ago. And in any case, it ultimately ended in a psychotic break when he chased Gauguin down the street with a knife, and he went home, mutilated part of his ear, and then he gifted it to a prostitute friend and said, guard this carefully. So again, it's a kind of epic moment in art history. Some have suggested that it actually didn't happen, and that two young boys accidentally shot Vincent van Gogh. I don't particularly believe that theory, but it's an interesting one. So this is Paul Gauguin's notable work. when I think of Paul Gauguin, perhaps this one more than anything, the spirit of the dead are watching. So you see this young woman, this young lover. She's very superstitious. She's afraid of the dark, and she's afraid of these spirits that kind of show up as little sparking spirits. And then you have this death image in the background. The spirit of the dead is watching. And again, just terrified, very, very superstitious. So according to island mythology, the title has two meanings. Either the young girl is thinking of the ghost, or the ghost is thinking of her. And bold, ambiguous shapes, really beautiful colors, interesting as far as the brushwork's really interesting. Oftentimes he would use a really rough canvas, almost burlap sometimes. And it had an eerie atmosphere, and it's, again, pretty puzzling work. So this was a young native common law wife, and again, he had a couple of these. This is Tahura, and so pretty famous. He actually had a little postcard picture of this work with him, and he took with him to the island source material some of these images that he found inspirational, and so this was one of them. This was Manet's Olympia, 1860s. Who Will I Marry? Again, his work not really recognized in his lifetime. He died pretty poor. He's buried in the Marquesa Islands. He leaves his family, a successful European life, but he was in business, and he leaves that, and he goes in search of natures, the essentials. He had some sort of midlife crisis, and so he did have 5 children, and his Danish wife ended up going back to her family. One expert, Matthew, said, of course he didn't find it. He died a twisted and bitter man, having alienated everyone both at home and in Tahiti. It's a sad story of a man who believed his own fiction. So in any case, it's just kind of interesting to me that certain aspects of his life are promoted, and then certain aspects of his life are hardly even discussed in art history. So far I'm not doing a Paul Gauguin lecture. Willem de Kooning, interchange. This is a detail, which means it's part of the work, and this is from David Geffen, and sold for just over 300 million in 2015. And so if you ever have a choice between, do I get the abstract expressionist or the impressionist work, choose the abstract expressionist. Time and time again, they are the heavy hitters in the art market. Billionaire Ken Griffin paid about 300 million for 2 paintings by abstract expressionist masters. And so this makes it a little hard when they talk about 2 works being sold. And in any case, Interchains originally sold in 1955 for $4,000. After the gallery took its cut, de Kooning likely pocketed around $2,000, and the spending power of $2,000 in 1955 was roughly equivalent to around $17,000, according to this source. The buyer was an architect and a son of Kaufmann's department store, and in any case, this, of course, was a headline for itself. Leonardo da Vinci, Salvator Mundi, and this is around 1500, sold for $450.3 million. Some sources say 453. My guess is that's a typo, but in any case, believed to be the last Leonardo in a private collection. Some question whether indeed it has a strong enough provenance to be a true Leonardo. But it still, as of 2021, still holds the record at $450 million. It's, of course, a Christ image and salvation of the world. And so Salvator Mundi. And so Salvator Mundi, again, means salvation of the world. And of course, his hand is in a blessing. Really, really gorgeous work. So again, some people think it's autograph Da Vinci and that it is reliable, and some people say no. And look at the sphere, the image of the world in his hand. It's really quite gorgeous. So I don't know. I kind of think it is. It's gorgeous. Anyway, so hopefully that gives you a little overview of the art market, which is still going crazy. And again, this is tip of the iceberg because there are many other works as well.